What's up, YouTube? In this episode, we're going to worry about creating a drop-down that will allow us to select the range of data we want for our chart. So this is a cryptocurrency price chart. We can do 30 days, 7 days, or a single day. In the previous episode, we built this where you can select a cryptocurrency from this drop-down and it will change the chart. So the very first thing we're going to do is we're going to create another drop-down with the different range options we will allow. Then we will make a change to either of the drop-downs, refresh the chart. So let's take a look at our code. Here we have where we're creating the chart and it's on change for this select. So we'll just go to the bottom of the select here and we will create a new select. This one is just going to have some hard-coded values. So it'll be a lot easier to create. So we'll just create an option and say something like 30 days. And this is what it's going to look like. So far so good. Now we can just add this other options in there. So I'm going to go with 30 days, 7 days, and 1 day. Now we have these options here. And what we will do is we will create a very similar function to this. We're just going to change that network call. So if you take a look at what we currently have, when we select a cryptocurrency, we'll grab the most recent request. This is the URL, and you can see it has currency that to compare it to is the USD, and days is 30, and the interval is daily. So we can modify this API call depending on which item is selected. So let's just iterate through this. We will start by creating an on change here in the select, and this will be a function. This function call is going to have an axios.get, and the URL we're going to get will be actually the same as this one here. However, we will just need to change it a bit. So this URL is from CoinGecko, and you can see maybe the first problem here, which we are using this variable here. This refers to the selected element from the other dropdown. So how would you get what item is currently selected if we're not inside of this on change where we have the event? Well, one way we could do this is to set some state, such as current selected. Then down here, you could just use that state instead of this c.id. But then we would have to do the same thing up here because we would want to maintain the range that we are currently using. So we couldn't just hard code interval daily and days 30 here. We would need to update this with the current selected range option, which we're defining down here. You know, maybe it's 1 day or 7 days. So we would have to do the same thing where we assign this to state and then reference it in the other API call. So basically we're going to flip. This one's going to use an event for the ID and state for the range. And then this one down here is going to use state for the ID and the event for the range. So that can work. That's how I actually designed it initially when I was just going through a run through of this code personally. So the problem though is that it's a little bit more complicated switching between the state and the event. So why don't we just keep everything consistent and use state for everything? In this situation, all you would need to do is update the state whenever you change one of those drop downs, and then define a function in one single location that's invoked for any of those changes. You might think just to define a function and use that name down in those event handlers, but what is the actual best proper way to invoke some code when there is a state change? Well, that is actually use effect. So we will create a use effect with a dependency array of those state variables. If that's a bunch of words that don't really mean a lot, let's just go ahead and try this. What we will do is we will say use effect, and inside of here we will pass a function, and then the dependency array here is going to be some state we define for the selected crypto, so the crypto that we can get the ID from, and we'll just call this the range, for example, which will be the days, and we can just adjust the interval hard-coded. So we will just have this for the days. So let's go ahead and define some state. We already have a selected, which we can use for the selected cryptocurrency. The other thing we're going to need though is the range. So we'll say range and set range, and this will come from use state, and we will give this a default value of 30. Now it's going to be a string passed in the API. If you want the actual data to be stored as an integer, you can do some hacking around that, but I'm not going to worry about that. This is just going to be a string. And now what we can do is we can make this use effect execute whenever there is a change to the selected cryptocurrency or the range. And inside of this function, we can define the API call. Now our existing onChange is going to be thinned out a lot. We are still going to want to set the selected here, but the actual API call is going to be moved to that new use effect. So I'm going to take all of this code here and just hope I can get the correct parentheses, think right there. So now this is what our new onChange looks like, and we can move this entire function call up here. So paste that, and we'll need to modify it a little bit. So instead of c.id, which came from the event, we will substitute this with selected.id, and we can do something very similar for the days here. So instead of hard coding days there, we will put range, and then we'll just test this out, see if it works. But until then, let's just go fix these onChanges. So it's going to be fairly similar for this one down here where we just set the state. So we have our select. We're not going to need to make an API call, so we'll just say set range, and we'll get the value from the event, so e.target.value. And because we want these to just be the 37 or 1, well, we will want to give it a value here, 30, and then 7, and then lastly we'll just do 1. Let's test this out. So we'll select cryptocurrency, change the state. Oh, Tether was such a bad option. Let's go with another one. Change the date, 30 days, 7 days, and 1 day. We might need to do some custom code for 1 day, but you can see that changing this dropdown does in fact refresh the chart. So far, so good. Reminder, the API does return 8 if you put in the value 7, so you can see there's actually 8 data points here. I'm really not too worried about that, but if you want, you can drop 1 from the array, or just request 6 days instead of 7. So for example, if you put the value 6 here, well, now when we choose 7 days, we're actually getting 7 values. And you could do something similar for 30 days as well, which I think returns 31, so you could change this value to 29. Let's test it out. And feel free to count those if you wish. I also wanted to try changing these to numbers instead of strings, so 29, 6, and 1. And we will change the state up here and you can see it says argument of type string is not assignable to parameter of type set state action number. So even though these are typed as numbers here, when we get e.target.value, it's given back as a string. It's probably best just to do strings, but you could also do parse int and pass in that value. So either one of those works. Let's try it just to make sure I'm not crazy. So select crypto and then change the days. Now let's take a moment to talk about the 1 day. And what I think I'm going to do is just change the API request to change the interval to hourly if we have selected a day. So to do that, we can go to the API call here and just do a ternary. We will do that with a $ curly braces, making sure this is within backticks, and we'll say range being equal to 1. Now make sure you get the type here. You see if we put this in quotes, we're going to get a TypeScript error, so we'll just use the value 1. If this is true, we will say interval is hourly. Otherwise, we will say what we have out here already, so let me just move these curly braces to the outside. Like that, and then surround this in quotes. So if range is 1, we want it to say interval hourly, otherwise we'll say interval daily. And let's make sure I don't accidentally have any spaces or anything in here. So everything should be connected. Let's try this out. We'll take a look at 1 day, and it already appears to have improved. So now we have hourly data. And let's switch to 7 days, make sure it still looks normal. So what we can also do is we can change the format. You can see for the first couple of hours it's 9:18 and then it goes to 9:17. Let's instead switch it to an hour format. So what we can do is we can do the same exact thing, but now for the format. So if the range is 1, we can change that format. So let's try that. So we will replace this here with a ternary. We're already in JavaScript, so we can just put the variable, we don't need curly braces, and we will say range being 1. We will change the format to hour, minute. Otherwise, we'll keep it as it was with month, day. Save. Let's take a look now. And you can see we get the times of the day. The minute is pretty much the same, so feel free to drop that if you want. So it'll just look like that, but that might look strange too, so I'm going to keep that on there. And then let's check the 7 days, and you can see it looks the same as it did. Cool, so we got the chart updating. Now we just need to worry about updating that title, which will work in a very similar way. You can see we have the default options defined up here, but we don't just want to use Chart.js align chart for our text every single time. So we can define the defaults up here if we want, but we can update it down here where we have set data. We could also set the options. So we could define a new call here, set options, and pass in some new value. So let's go ahead and copy this object that's defined up here. Right here, and I already got the curly braces, so we'll just grab that and paste that down here. Paste the text. We could just put something like, well, I don't know. Let's go with price over last plus range plus and then days. There we go. Let's just see if this is working before I get too deep into this. Let's go back. It says price over last 6 days. That's not what I want because now it's basically off 1 because of the weird changing to the actual value we did. So, screw it. I'm just going to change these values back. That'll be the easiest fix. Boom. And then if you want, you can just remove one of the elements from the array. So price over the last 7 days. Similarly, we can do a ternary to remove that parentheses s, so let's find that. We will just define this as a ternary instead. So if range is equal to 1, and we don't need curly braces either because I'm already inside of code, then we will return day. And let's go ahead and capitalize these values. Otherwise, we will say days. And I will put a period for both of these. And then we will surround this in parentheses, like so. And then let's change to 1 day. There we go. You can add the crypto name in there as well. So $ curly braces, and then just selected dot name. And now I should say Monero price over last 7 days. I don't find this too helpful because we're only working with like a single cryptocurrency. If you had multiple charted, that'd be kind of cool. But you can remove this by setting legend to display false. And we will do that for the default settings as well. Display false. And now when we choose an option such as Bitcoin, you can see there's no more legend here, and if we change this, it's still no more legend. One other problem I wanted to show is that on page refresh we are getting an error in the console, and this is because we are making a network request with an undefined cryptocurrency as nothing is selected. This use effect we defined is executing on initial page load. So what we need to do is we just need to say if not selected and then say return. So now, in theory, when we refresh, we shouldn't get that network request. So far, so good. And we should still be able to select a cryptocurrency and everything works as expected. This should also fix the scenario where we select the days first, we're not getting anything. If we didn't have this line, let's just remove this for a moment. What'll happen is it'll allow us to choose a day and it'll make that network request before we've chosen a cryptocurrency to display. So definitely want to make sure we have that line in there. So that's all I got in this video. It was kind of interesting trying some different options with this chart. What will we do in the next video? I don't know. I guess we'll just have to come and find out. So hopefully whatever we're doing is exciting. We might build upon this or try something new. Thank you for watching. Stay tuned. Be sure to subscribe. Peace out.